Teens, which is basically an organization to promote environmental sustainability amongst teens. That was the reason why we started. A little bit about me. My passions are, of course, fashion and photography and like dancing. Very artsy, I guess. And like that's just a little bit about me and my organization.
Thank you.
Cool, I can go next. Hi everyone, I'm so happy to be here. I work for Renoon. I'm the head of outreach and of the ambassador program. Renoon is basically an e-commerce that provides easier access for customers to sustainable brands. So what we do is very similar to what, for example, List does. So we partner with brands and we use our proprietary technology to allow the user to look for what they need from a bunch of brands. And yes, I joined the project halfway through its development, and right now I'm heading, as I said, the ambassador program, which is great because we try to educate as much as possible people who are at university and younger to the polluting effects of the fashion industry and also teach them how to become future leaders of sustainable fashion.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for sharing.
Oh, you can go. Yeah.
No, please go ahead.
Okay. Hi. So my name is VT, and I am the founder of Green Couture. We are an education program dedicated to, of course, educating Gen Z on what sustainable fashion is and how they can participate in it easily. We basically create educational content, and then, of course, in the future, we're going to be hosting workshops and, yeah, a national clothing swap, I guess, initiative. So, yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Really glad to have you here.
Hi, I'm Madeline. I'm the founder and CEO of Sense of Shelf. Sense of Shelf is an online boutique for eco-friendly and ethical clothing brands. We have about 13 brands on the site right now. It's almost 2 years old at this point, which is great. And yeah, it's just been a lot of fun working with small businesses, educating conscious consumers and making it easier to shop your values. Things are still cute. Everything is under $200. So we're trying to make it easier than, going to Farfetch or going to a Maison de Mode for your eco-friendly and ethical clothing. Background on me. I have a background in finance and worked in wealth management. And then I got my master's in fashion and design management in Milan. I worked at Saks with the executive team doing like business analytics and strategy for a year. And then I left to start Sense of Shelf in April 2019. Excited to be here.
Thank
Alrighty.
you.
I think that leaves me. Hey all, my name is Zoelle Co, pronounced he, him, and I'm the co-founder and executive director at the Green Consumer Project, which works to streamline consumer access to environmentally friendly brands and products.
Thank you. If we want to start with questions, I think our main one to start off is, how was your organization founded? / why did you specifically decide that there was a need for your organization? If Mardette wants to start to kind of keep the same order. Thank you.
Sure. So my friend Zainab and I started our organization over like the beginning of quarantine. We're both seniors in high school, and we kind of like wanted to have a club at school, like where you can physically go to school, but like because we weren't able to do that because of COVID, we decided to start an online organization with like the same idea. So we really thought that having a place to promote like what it means to be sustainable and how you can start being sustainable at home, we thought that there was a need for that. and we thought that it would be nice to have some kind of place to give information that's necessary for people and stuff like that. So we just decided to start the organization, and we've already held our fashion campaign, which basically concerns like the fashion industry and how it leads to pollution in our environments. And we had like some tips of how to limit the pollution and our contribution to that industry.
Cool, maybe I can go next. So basically Renown was started because our CEO, Iris, she was looking for a dress, a little black dress to wear at her firm's party. She used to work at Nike in Europe with startups and innovation. But the thing is that she tried to find a sustainable little black dress and she just couldn't find what she was looking for. She took about a month and a half, which of course is quite a long time. And so she decided that this needed to change. It should have been easier for consumers, especially those that are used to buying in fast fashion or just in general in more consumer-friendly ways. To find what they need. And so she decided to put together a team of people that she had been working on. She's originally Italian, but she worked in Amsterdam to create this team. And basically what Renew now is that we try to call it, we like to call it in the business, the superpower for people who want to be conscious, or your universe of conscious fashion. So we try to not only offer alternatives, offer something easier to buy fashion, but also we try to educate through our blog and through our workshops and our retalks, so that people not only buy less, but what they do buy, they buy better. And so that's kind of the philosophy of Renew.
Yeah, so Green Couture was founded, I think, over a year ago, in response to the rampant like consumerism that I guess Gen Z has. It can be like noted that I guess like fast fashion is really prominent in Gen Z, of course, because of a high online presence, social media. So I started Green Couture because I was first a remake ambassador. And I realized that appealed a lot to like millennials, exactly like what they did. And I specifically wanted to do something that I guess like appealed and helped Gen Z with sustainable fashion. So yeah, I guess what we first started off local in my area in my school like over a year ago. And I think this summer I wanted to like expand it a little bit nationally and internationally. So yeah, we're in the process of that. But yeah.
Am I next? I guess so. Yeah, I think the reason I started Sense of Shelf was probably two things. Definitely, I had been previously very much like enamored with the luxury fashion world, and when I worked at Saks, that was very much where I thought I was going to stay. And then as I learned more and more about different supply chains and the actual value chain of a lot of the garments and accessories that we think of as luxury, it became more and more clear to me that this sort of like scarcity mindset that, oh, you know, luxury goods, because they're inherently few of them made, have a lower impact. You know, these are quality goods made with craftsmen. Like you think of the craftsmanship of a Gucci bag, and you're imagining that like that's like some little old man in Italy, you know, like hand making it. And it became very, very obvious to me after getting my master's abroad, and then after working in Saks and like actually seeing a lot of the inventory, just how much that's very much a marketing myth, and that there's mass production everywhere. There's shady supply chains everywhere. And the only way to really kind of combat that is to have shorter supply chains and people that are really making fewer, better goods, and charging a reasonable price for it. So that was the first thing that led to me starting Sense of Shelf. And then the second thing was, as a conscious consumer, when I was shopping, I never saw anything that I actually wanted to wear. I never saw anybody other than like Cali babes wearing it in like a field of wheat or something like that. It just seemed very out of touch with who I thought was interested in wearing sustainable fashion, the marginalized and Native communities that, you know, really founded the principles of sustainability. Like none of those people were being included. And so it just seemed like there was a need for a sustainable retailer that actually worked with small brands and brands that were also affordable and brands that included all kinds of founders.
Can I jump in?
Yes,
Yeah,
you can.
okay.
Thank you.
Madeline, I love everything you were saying, especially as a woman of color. So I started in Zoelle Co that has taken many forms and now is becoming a collective for sustainable fashion brands, cruelty-free beauty companies, sustainable fashion bloggers, and other creatives who want to support the space. There really is an ecosystem like behind the scenes where people are trying to figure out how can they be more connected, how can they really support each other, and really making this a mainstream industry. And it's definitely starting to happen. You're starting to see like some of the major players who've been around for a while, like Girlfriend Collective, really win this year, which is exciting. But there's so many more that could be winning. And so we're setting out to be the glue between all of these people. My personal background is in digital marketing. So I've done a lot of really big campaigns. And right now we're about to launch like our first big campaign with like 20 of the brands that we're working with. So I'm really excited about that. But what really resonated for me with what you said, Madeline, is, you know, I come from corporate, but wearing a suit every day is just not for me. So when I was shopping, I would shop at J. Crew, it's like, okay, it's cute, but I don't actually resonate with this. And then when I got into sustainability and I was asking people like, okay, fashion's bad for the environment. Like, how do I shop where it isn't bad for the environment? And the number one answer was like, go thrift. But I don't love thrifting either. And so it was really a journey through Instagram, primarily, finding brands that made new products or refurbished products that speak more to my most authentic self. But definitely, when I first got into this, I didn't see really any founders that look like me. So every time I did, it was like, okay, we have to work together. I have to support you. And so that's one of the shifts that our company is having to make. I remember like I met with one of the directors for The Real Real. She was like their talent acquisition director. And she was like, I didn't even know that a Black woman owned this company because I'm seeing Black girls on the feed. And it's like, I can't really find any Black owned businesses. So it's definitely been a process. So I appreciate that, you know, you realized that there was that need and also set out to fill it.
Thank you for sharing.
All right, I think that's my turn. Yeah, the idea for the Green Consumer Project actually came to me a little over a year ago when I had decided to stop wearing leather products specifically. And when I was looking for vegan and non-leather alternatives to things like wallets or dress shoes that use pretty regularly, I realized that there were so many different brands out there, but for smaller brands that may not necessarily have had much exposure or that were new to the fashion industry, they were having immense troubles actually getting recognized and being able to get the word out about their brand and the kind of products that they were making. And so the idea for the Green Consumer Project came basically out of my struggles looking for brands that I actually enjoyed and ones that, again, could make a difference and had less exposure in the world. So by making a hub for conscious consumers to locate and purchase products from that they actually enjoy, that are within their price range and more, I realized that there really wasn't anything out there for people like me who wanted to be shopping consciously. And I always ask my friends, why do you still shop at Zara or J. Crew? And the number one response I do get is convenience. The fact that all these stores that produce fast fashion products, have so many different products for low prices. And I realized that as more consumers drive their money and drive their attention to sustainable fashion brands, more companies are going to follow. You've seen that trend in recent years with companies like Nike launching, even just one line of sustainable shoes, such as the Space Hippies. And it really goes to show that, organizations like ours can and are making a difference.
Thank you guys so much for sharing. I believe that was our last panelist for that question. I know you guys talked a lot about your mission and your impact on the sustainable fashion arena. So one question I have for you all is, what is the biggest challenge in tackling sustainable fashion that your organization has come across, both as a youth-led organization, but also in relation to content station surrounding sustainable fashion?
So I would say our organization is pretty new. It's like a couple months, like more than a couple months, but we've done a lot of research on like fast fashion and the fashion industry before starting it, because that's like one of our passions, and we just like spend as much time as possible to just understand what the problem is and like what's the solution to the problem. But our biggest like challenge was finding like a solution. Like we can go like our main thing during our campaign was informing other teens about like how horrible the fashion industry is, but like finding ways to tell especially teenagers how to stop contributing to the fashion industry was hard, because like the one way is thrifting, I guess, or buying less clothes, but like some people don't have access to thrift stores, or they just don't want to go to thrift stores. And another thing is like, in order to be sustainable, you still have to have money or even access to sustainable shops. So we had a hard time like telling our audience what they can do to limit their contribution to fast fashion or like the fashion industry. So our biggest tip was basically just try to buy less clothes, and even if you do buy clothes that are deemed fast fashion, it's okay, because like you have no other choice. So just try your best, really. That was kind of our advice.
I definitely can chime in here. Our organization has been I think we're all trying to figure it out, right? We all realize that our consumers want to know how to become more sustainable. They really want to do it, but it feels like there's too much of a barrier. What I'm learning is there's levels to it and everybody can enter at a different level. So, if you're a college student or a high school student, thrifting probably is the way for you, or upcycling. So there's so many girls on Poshmark who are making really beautiful, newer looking clothes where it's like totally on trend. And that's why I didn't like thrifting. It was like, okay, this looks like it came from 1990. I don't want that. But if I can buy something that's been upcycled and it's like actually better and more unique than anything I can find anywhere else, then I'm willing to spend like $25, $30, whatever it costs. So I think for teens, I would say start there. I think for someone like me, where maybe I feel comfortable spending a higher price point, but something more comparable to Zara, where it's like $50 to $100, then there's definitely a range of sustainable companies that you can buy from. If you typically would buy like the Chanel's or, the higher end companies, there's a plethora of high end sustainable fashion brands. So I think like categorizing it for people. So it's like, okay, come in where you are, forget the other things. But once you start earning more, then you can graduate to these levels. Then it starts to feel relatable to what we've already been taught. It's like, okay, I was going to do that anyway, but now I can choose from this group of brands as opposed to the group of brands that I know, because those are the ones that my parents took me to when I went to the mall, or that's the bag that my mom always bought. Does it make sense? Yeah.
Thank you for your contributions. Actually, I agree on most of them. Well, all of them, actually. I think that the cool, the issue that we've been facing when building Renewn was that not necessarily all people have similar values. So that's why like we put so much effort into trying to customize the experience so that, you know, I might not be vegan, but I still want to not buy leather. So I associate with vegan values. Whereas someone who might want to focus more on like human well-being, so the control of the production chain and this and that. I mean, I don't want to reduce it to a this and that because I know it's a whole lot of mix of issues, but of course we don't have the time to delve deep into them. And so I feel like through that we kind of overcame that obstacle, but we still are facing a deeper obstacle with regards to getting exposure outside of the niche of people who already shop sustainably. You both said, you know, it's very hard to just go out to people. I mean, myself, I'm 20, like I just got out of high school, well, 2 years ago, but still, I personally hadn't shopped by thrifting and this and that for until I moved to London. So it was like, what, 2 years ago? We didn't have access to thrift shops where I used to live. And I just had a very hard time suggesting people around me alternatives. It's very hard to get access to that. And so, you know, you always end up buying in Zara. And that's why we have a policy of positivity inside of Renewn. We never like go after people because they didn't have access to a certain kind of brand or a certain kind of sustainable swap, because we know that, like, as both of you just said, like there are different tiers of sustainability and there's different access points. And we don't want sustainability to be just an elitist access. So what we're trying to do is having brands that encompass a large range of prices and of values. I mean, we can have Ganni, we can have, you know, Stella McCartney, Patagonia, but we need to remember that we must feature, and that's what something that I think really resonates when Madeline said that all of her brands like are up to $200. I mean, I myself don't have $600 to buy a Ganni skirt. But for example, on our website, we feature also Vestiaire Collective picks and selections. And so I know that maybe myself not having access to a thrift store, especially with lockdown, but I still can go on the store and find something that is available to me. And I think that's also the best way to get outside of the niche of sustainability and make sustainability become mainstream in a positive way, not in the greenwashing way, in a positive way of like making it accessible.
Yeah, I feel like we're all kind of like hitting on that point that like it's tricky to at both times encourage conscious consumption while also acknowledging that it's such a privilege to be in a position to be like, oh, I'll just spend $120 on a shirt. Like, no, like in what world is that? But we're conditioned to think that we should never pay that for a shirt, where the truth of the matter is that like in some instances that's the true value of that shirt. And so how do we make it so that those certain materials and like those fabrics that are better for the world are produced enough so that then the price comes down, right? Like that's the reason why these things are so expensive, is because, okay, fair labor, you're always going to have to be able to pay someone a fair living wage, but the actual components like are not produced in mass the way polyester is. And that is the reason why that these things cost the way they do. So I think probably there's something to this movement or government policy actually stepping in to sort of force this in that direction. So I think you asked what the biggest struggle is. I think the biggest struggle is that at the same time every day I'm trying to support small businesses. I'm trying to encourage people to support those small businesses with their dollars, but also to say, this isn't really on us though. You know, like there are big corporations, they're the ones at fault. They're the ones we should be giving a lot of heat to, and they're the ones that should ultimately be responsible for cleaning up this mess. I love you for buying my shirt, but at the same time, it doesn't make you a better activist. It doesn't make you a better, more green human being. You didn't save the planet with that shirt. And so it's constantly a juggling of being like, there is no perfectly sustainable garment. There are better things. And so if you have the money, you have the privilege, you have the time, you have the ability, please, yes, please buy this other shirt. But it's not the only way to do it. And in some cases, it's not the best way. That's probably the trickiest thing every day, is holding those same truths in each hand.
Yeah, so I guess like a problem that I don't know if like I'm like repeating the same thing. I think we all face the same issue. One thing is first, like classism isn't like a predominant thing when it comes to sustainable fashion. A lot of people don't really have the privilege for, I guess, having a sustainable lifestyle. So at Green Couture, one way that we emphasize is that, yeah, I know it's really hard to, I guess, let go. If you have the privilege, of course, like that's best, but even don't feel guilty, of course, with buying fast fashion clothing. It's just like one major issue, even when it comes to thrifting, even is like consumerism and buying things that you won't wear and that you won't need. So we want to mostly emphasize that when it comes to sustainable fashion. Of course, like there are better ways, but we know that a lot of people can't participate in like a truly sustainable lifestyle. Another thing, like mentioned before, is that I guess like there's always, when I've seen people talking about sustainable fashion, there's a lot of blaming on consumers, like, oh, like why aren't you like I remember there was like this post a couple days ago on Instagram that I saw, and it was like, how can you like stop like slave labor in like the fashion industry? And it's like, you have to do it, but it's like that's not it. Like it's not only individual actions, it's also mostly corporations. It's like the brands that are mostly responsible for it. So I think what we're going to try to do with Green Couture is mainly emphasizing that corporations are at fault, although like we as consumers are like, you know, influenced by what they're doing, by the fast fashion model. And then I think like a third thing is that there's a lack of faith when it comes to, I guess, changing this whole industry. I know, for example, like my family members, like my mom, for example, like worked in the supply chain, and I know like many of my family members have seen the effects that have occurred. Pollution, for example. I remember like we're like near like a fast fashion like factory back in India, my family, and I like remember having like so many health issues and just like never seeing that ending. So I think there's like a lack of like faith in that change. So I guess like also creating that optimistic like view that there can be change. So yeah, I think those are the three main issues.
Yeah, to go off of that, it's also really important to remember that, most of the other panelists have been saying, that at the end of the day, it is up to the corporations to change what they're doing and the practices that they're following in producing fashion and producing textiles. But also as a consumer, I think a lot of people tend to undervalue the power that the dollars that they hold in their hands actually has. You know, the fact that as more and more consumers are who do have the disposable income to be able to be shopping sustainably, as more people choose to do so, and more people recognize the fact that sustainable fashion is inevitably going to have an immense impact on the environment. You know, more companies are following suit, and more organizations are making sustainability pledges. Like even Amazon claimed that they're going net neutral, carbon neutral by, I believe, 2040, which, you know, it's up to you how much you want to believe them, but it still goes to show that the fact of, you know, activism really does work, and it has the capability and the potential to create change. And the work that we are doing does have positive effects on the world and on the environment. And I think that's really, really encouraging, that, you know, the challenges that we face as activists inevitably is also one of the best parts of activism.
Thank you for that. Our next question kind of tackles a lot about what was said in the like covered in your answers to the last question. But often we hear the same things over and over again, like thrift shopping and only buying what you need, which are all great strategies to reduce our impact on the environment. But what is like one thing that's like really unique that you can suggest to viewers that they might not have heard before as far as a strategy?
No. So I wanted to address a couple of things. I think that the idea that sustainability is owned by the privileged is a myth. I grew up with blue collar family members. Like most of my family members worked for like the post office. But everything that our generation is coming into now is what my grandmother was teaching me. They thrifted a lot. If they wanted to get rid of clothes, they never threw them away. They would give them to someone else. These are the same principles. The other thing is buying very frugally. So anything that was more expensive, they would teach me like, okay, take care of this because you can keep it for a long time, which is that whole idea of like retaining. If you're gonna spend more money on something, that's okay. And it's actually better because you're gonna have it for much longer. You may have it for so long that you can pass it on to someone else, in future generations. So even though my family didn't have a lot of money, they would spend more money on like shoes or coats because those things last for a really long time if you take care of them. Definitely jewelry. Jewelry in our family was like something that I look for, even still, look forward to being passed down from the older women in my family. So I think when you start to relate, like, okay, in the Black community, we're already doing these things. This is what it would look like to do it with these new brands. I think the conversation will hit a little bit differently. That's one. The other thing is, I think everyone's a social activist. Like, every time you go to your family and you say, hey, this is what is happening, like, we all have a little piece of the puzzle that maybe the other person doesn't. Like, I just learned that a lot of my clothes are made out of plastic and it made me sad. But being able to go to my family and say like, okay, plastic is made from oil and you understand that oil is bad and why that's bad for the environment. So now I can have that conversation a little bit more fluidly about if your clothes are technically made out of oil, it's gonna have the same effect if it's sitting in a landfill. Every time I tell someone that I'm close to who trusts me outside of business about these things, then that is creating a little bit of change. And then I hear them telling other people, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
His main mission kind of is like the idea of sustainability is not one thing. Like you can be sustainable, like this idea is kind of creative, but like buying one shirt that's sustainable is not really what being sustainable is. So I would say like kind of implementing this idea of being sustainable into your life little by little, and like making sure that like it kind of blends in with everything in your life and not just fashion. Like if you think about like the food you eat, like where you're getting your food from, and kind of the products you use to clean your house, all these little things do add up. And like they're all part of either the problem like of being sustainable or limiting your contribution to pollution. So I would say like looking at the bigger picture and how everything you do or every part of your life is feeding into the idea of being sustainable.
Yeah, I feel like this has been touched upon, but what I learned from just discussing with ambassadors and the community that we're building, it's two things. Of course, as I said, you can always like suggest people go to the thrift shop or just like try to buy sustainable. But I think that being sustainable is not only a consumer choice, but is a lifestyle. I mean, I do spend a lot of my time in searching for alternatives, trying to make changes. I do have to admit that like it would be so much easier to just go to the supermarket and buy, you know, the I don't know, the toilet cleaner that I can find for so much cheaper at the supermarket, but I do spend 3 days looking for a more sustainable option, and then I order it, and then I try to make sure that the shipment is carbon neutral. Like it takes time to do it. And we shouldn't think that we are bad because we can't make the transition in 2 seconds. And so when people like ask me, they're always like, I don't know, replying to not only mine, but like Renoon's post, like, oh my God, I love this idea for you. I love this, I love that. I've been posting about sustainability for the past 2 years, at least. And this year I reposted this like post, and I started about Black Friday and kind of like the idea of the joy of missing out the Black Friday and the the consumerism kind of joy. And this was the first time that I saw my post just being reposted by so many people that like literally quoted me or like told me that. And I spent so much time trying to share my idea and share these like ideas. And when I see my American relatives that are born and raised in consumerism, they have a thing for everything, they don't mend socks, they just like throw them away. I mean, I'm not saying that all Americans are like that, but they're very stereotypical, okay? And they repost it. It really pays back all of the efforts, and it's a journey. Do not expect to make a change. I don't know if it's clear, but I feel like that's the biggest advice that's not usually passed on, that I think should be given.
I'll just keep mine to like a fun little, I guess, tip. I always grew up with a family that always took their shoes to the cobblers. Like we have a local cobbler in upstate New York, and like I always go there. Delmar Bootery, they know what's up. They're great. They do a great job. If any of you guys find yourself in Voorheesville, New York, but they do an amazing job. And like I literally have pairs of shoes that are 13 years old that still fit me, and I keep taking them back to the cobbler. I keep getting them resold. It costs about like $30 to get them resold. It's not nothing, but you know, those shoes that you invested in and you saved up for, knowing that you would take care of them well and that they would last, like that I think is a great sustainability tip. You know, you don't have to just like buy shoes and say, okay, that these will get me through the winter, and I'll then it's done once they get all salty and gross. Like, you know, you can take them to a cobbler, they get all of those stains out. So yeah, definitely something to, like, if you're going to invest in nice clothes and nice shoes, you can always send them to the cobbler.
So I guess like a unique tip is, I mean, of course, I don't like, I think this is already mentioned before and emphasized, but like really investing and seeing, first of all, like, do you truly want this clothing item? And of course, like upcycling, I think that's the best thing to do. I know that I grew up doing that. But I think like another unique way to, I guess, take part in the sustainable, I guess, fashion lifestyle is like taking the opportunity, if you can, to advocate for change, and I guess advocating as to why, like advocating for aspects about why the fast fashion, I guess, the whole concept is bad. And I guess like taking step-by-step things, like I guess like calling out brands for their working conditions. I know with the COVID-19, a lot of garment workers don't have the protection that they need. A lot of them weren't getting paid. So I guess you know, speaking out about that, and I guess doing that at the same time while like having that lifestyle, I think that would be a great thing to do.
Yeah, I feel like there's so much of a focus on shopping consciously and sustainably, which is incredibly important. You know, it's the whole mission of the GCP. But the most sustainable thing you can do, and I feel like is so overlooked, is really nothing at all. You know, buying a product that's going to last you 30 years is inevitably so much more sustainable than any recycled or hemp-based product that you're going to find on the market. And as much as I love promoting sustainable fashion brands, buying a sustainable pair of shoes or something that you don't need is essentially the antithesis of sustainability. There's no reason to go out of your way and buy, again, like I have this amazing pair of hemp-based, eco-friendly, and vegan waterproof shoes, and they're great, but I bought them because I needed them. They like actually brought value to my life. Buying a pair of shoes just because they look cool is gonna create carbon emissions no matter what. Like the shipping costs of those shoes to my house created carbon. The production of the hemp, the production of the shoes and the manufacturing of the shoes from hemp to the shoes themselves, or making the soles even just from cork, does create carbon emissions. And it's so important to remember that. And I feel like that is very overlooked in the sustainable fashion industry specifically.
Can I answer to that real quick? I don't know if we have time. Okay. I love that concept. Like, I mean, this like shirt that I'm wearing is my mom's. She bought it at the first store that Abercrombie ever opened in Seattle, I think in 1991, probably. But I think that the bigger issue is that for as much as I would like everyone to just go to their mom's closet and just reuse all of her clothes and not buy anything else, I must say that I myself sometimes do want that little new thing and that little new, piece of like trendy clothing, because I mean, I'm a fashion freak. That's what I've been raised into. I mean, I'm from Milan, come on guys. But the thing is that I do get that like we should get to that point, but in the meantime, I feel like maybe that's just my opinion, but like we need to shift to like a middle ground, because I can't imagine thousands and millions of people just like stopping shopping so often. But that's also my point of view. I don't want to say that any point of view is wrong. It's just
So to piggyback on what you're saying, the industry is now going into the circular model. Like a lot of the companies that have funding, so like Thousand and Fell, I don't know if you guys know about them, but I had a conversation with one of their founders like a month ago, and they have significant funding to do circular fashion, but it always will require a tech element to it, because you got to be able to take those old jeans or whatever it is and then repurpose it into something else. So I think, if more companies can have access to that renewable cycle, then that starts to take away this problem that we're talking about. Right now, it's really expensive to be a part of that funnel, because you're talking about, like for Thousand Fell, for example, they had to do a partnership with UPS so that anybody who buys their shoes from a Madewell store can go back to Madewell and trade in those shoes before they buy a new pair. It's great that they're doing a buyback cycle, but like how many people can get to someone high enough at UPS to even work that deal? So I think this is where we start talking about like inequity in the fashion space amongst founders. And it's like, okay, well, what hacks exist where regular people, regular brand owners can become a part of what's going on? So I can't remember the exact name of the company, but Cotton Incorporated, they have like a tech arm now where they're taking old jeans, and I think Levi was like a part of their campaign, but they're taking old jeans and then they're like refurbishing them for housing installation and new jeans. But I think anybody could like reach out to them and, form a partnership with them. I think the other way is if you see a smaller company doing a buyback program, then they probably figured it out, and maybe reaching out to them, because it's going to be easier to have those conversations. They're probably going to be more likely to share that information with you, because they are still in an activist mindset as opposed to like the capitalist mindset of like, I got to pay back my investors and I got to make a bunch of money. So I totally resonate with what you said, because like I said, I don't love thrifting, but I love the ideas that are coming out where either the clothing itself is biodegradable, like you can plant it and it will be fully gone in a couple of years or a year. Or the idea of like taking my old clothes and then making it into something new where I don't even realize that it's reused textiles.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for the conversation. We have a question that just came in from Leah. She said, do any of the panelists have tips for starting our own initiatives or passion projects so that the message of sustainable fashion could be spread within our own communities? Maybe more, perhaps this question is asking a little bit more about the local scale. Maybe talk a little bit about how you guys got involved on your local communities and how you guys promoted it within that.
I can kind of answer this question. So like when we had our fashion campaign, a big part of that campaign was talking with local sustainable shop owners, and we actually got to like interview a few owners that have shops in DC, which is really close to where we live, and we were able to get their message out there and kind of like start thinking about what sustainable fashion is and like how you probably like as a teenager you probably can't like afford the clothes that they sell, but like just knowing that they exist, you can like prepare yourself and be like make a decision to kind of just have this kind of lifestyle. And if you want to have this kind of lifestyle, you can like decide for yourself, I'm going to save a couple bucks when I can so that I can afford these type of clothes. So I would say like reach out to people around you that you know kind of want to spread your message, and then have them like ask them a couple questions. If they can like work with you, that'll be great. If not, you can reach out to other organizations locally or not even locally who promote your message so that you can like get a larger audience for your organization.
So for Green Couture, I know that for a year we were basically on the local scale. When I started it, it was mostly like I did stuff within my school and then within my, I guess, like county. And I think like starting off small is like the best thing to do because that's where you see the most impact. So for example, for Green Couture, I know like with now that I'm expanding, I'm trying to expand it a little bit more now. I don't have that. I'm not able to see that much. Of course, that's because I'm like working on it right now. But I know like when I did events in my school, like workshops with like how to upcycle clothes and, you know, having like discussions about it, I saw like the impact in like a personal way. And then like I guess seeing it in like I guess you can see more of the impact. And then we also did this thing where we would do clothing drives and give it to kids in my county who didn't have access to, I guess, like clothes. And I guess like just it's really easy to see that impact and like learn a lot more when you're doing it in the like I guess locally and I guess maybe even statewide too. But yeah, I would just definitely recommend starting out small because that's where you see the most impact, and I guess that's where you learn the most. So yeah, and it does make a lot of, I guess, change. I know like from doing like classroom like discussions of like within 5 to 10 people, I was able to make more of an impact of, I guess, like changing like a team's mindset on sustainable fashion. So yeah, I would definitely emphasize that.
I'd love to piggyback off that real quick on specifically the fact of doing clothing drives is a really, really great direct action you can take within your local communities. And it's also important to remember that a lot of the like kind of typical places where people tend to donate their clothes actually aren't very good with, I guess, the accountability for where those clothes are going, what happens with them. And as much as 20% of the clothes that you don't do donate does end up in landfills. So I would say when you're running a clothing drive, it's really important to find, great local places that are actually going to take the clothes that you're donating, whether that be, like new clothes or used clothes, and are actually going to find them a great home. So for example, we worked with Housing Works, which is an organization in New York City that resells all the clothes that you donate and takes those proceeds and funds AIDS research with that. And there's all kinds of different amazing local organizations like churches that can also be great options.
Thank you guys for that answer. We're going to continue to Q&A in just a little bit. We want to finish out some of the questions that we have in general for our panelists. The next one being, what are some things that people should look for when it comes to sustainable clothing? And I believe this is something that you guys kind of answered in the last question. So in continuation with that idea, in an ideal future, how do you see the fashion world kind of evolving? Or like what changes do you believe need to be made?
I'm really excited about this question because I feel like I'm having the conversation with everybody that I come across now. I'm like, the same way that you look at your label for your food, for your lotion, whatever it is, you got to look at your clothes in that same way. Like polyester, blah, blah, blah. People need to know, okay, these are the plastics, or they need to know how much water goes into, feeding cotton crops. Because without knowing that information, you can't make more informed decisions. So I think it's educating people the same way that whenever you meet people where they already are, as far as education, it's more likely that they're going to adopt it. So, I had a conversation with a brand owner that we're going to be partnering with who makes 100% silk garments and was really, really passionate about the fact that she has skincare problems. But silk doesn't irritate her skin, whereas most fabrics do. And I was like, I didn't even think about it in the same way as, somebody who also has sensitive skin, but maybe not to fabric, not to the extent that she does. But I definitely have sensitive skin when it comes to like my facial products. And whenever I find something that I can use and it doesn't irritate my skin, I'm like, oh my gosh, let me tell everybody about it. So she totally roped me in that way. And then she had the conversation with me about, and because silk is an organic material, then it's biodegradable. And I was like, okay, this is really amazing. So I think having the conversation that way too, like anything that comes from organic matter is probably going to be sustainable. So a cotton shirt is going to be biodegradable, but it's just that cotton isn't good farming wise. It's really bad for the land and all that stuff. So just starting to be able to break it down and categorize it for people is really going to empower them to be able to teach it to their community, whether it's, their family or their friends, in a way that is authentic to them. And that's what I'm saying happening more and more with my friends. They're having the same conversation, but they're starting from what they're passionate about. So if they care more about, like I said, skincare, then that's where they start. Or if they care more about being a vegan, then that's where they start. And they're like, okay, the same way that you would make sure that you don't have anything that was made from an animal in your food, then look for the label in this way.
Maybe I can just go next, just because everyone, like, we have so much effort into trying to find like good brands. But the thing is that right now, when you look for sustainable brands, there is not a definition, because as we said multiple times throughout the panel, there is no perfect zero emissions garments unless you get something that has already been used, but also like, the thing is that I would say everyone has different values. I would say that certain people see organic cotton and then they go, oh my God, this is sustainable. I mean, is it really as much as like as sustainable as it could be? No. But I think that when you as a consumer know what organic cotton is, how good it is, how bad it actually still is, then, and you make an a decision that has some study behind it, then you have made a conscious decision when you're making your purchase. And so I would say, and I would also answer this way to the previous question that was raised by one of the participants. Do use social networks and the internet to your favor. There are so many resources out there that do not cost anything to enter. Education is so highly available online that I would just say go Google I, for example, didn't know what tencel was. Tencel is this like synthetic fiber that's not synthetic fiber, but it's very similar to polyester, but it's made out of wood. And I didn't know what it was. I went, for example, on Renew, we have a glossary, and I just clicked on tencel, and I discovered like the magic of tencel. And now, even from Zara, which is, we all know that's not perfect, they have tencel t-shirts. So now if a friend of mine goes, how can I decide on buying like, you know, sustainable things? I would say if you really have to buy something from Zara, just buy everything that's Join Life and tencel, because it's probably one of the best ways.
Yeah, we have on sensorshelf.com, we have like a fabric guide as well for like the fabric that you most often see on the site, because I think there's just a lot. I mean, there's just a lot out there, and it's honestly confusing, especially with there's a lot of different certifications, and obviously from country to country, those certifications are also different. So that can be really confusing. The confusing thing is, like as you mentioned, is that there's a world of synthetics, and that's the polyesters, the nylons of the world, and then there's the semi-synthetics, where the origin is like a natural input, so it's the wood of the world or bamboo, but in order to get it to a viscose material to be able to be spun and turned into thread, there are a lot of petrochemicals involved. So then it's knowing what those fabrics are, how it gets to be in a t-shirt form, and understanding the brands that are responsible for those fabrics and the water processes and the water recycling and treatment that they do. And so there's a lot to it. So I think it's definitely about, I think what I would hope for the fashion industry is that there is more onus put on corporations and the top end of a supply chain to actually be held accountable for that. It's really easy out there to say, oh, this is made from bamboo, and everybody gets excited, but you know, that just is completely glossing over the solvents that are required to turn bamboo into that soft, sustainable fabric. I mean, so I think that's, I guess, where I would hope the fashion industry goes, similarly to, you know, all of these sustainable missions by 2030, 2050. We see that out there, and you know what, we have 11 years left until it's irreparable damage done to our planet. So I don't know if I care what your goals are for 2050, you know what I mean? So I think that's what I would hope, is just like a lot more accountability put on corporations in the fashion industry.
I just wanted to say one thing that I hope for, I guess, the future, and I think that's the question, right? I've kind of forgot it. Was that the question? Could you repeat it again?
Of course, I can repeat it. So in an ideal future, how do you see the fashion world evolving, and what changes do you think need to be
Okay,
made?
yeah. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was answering the question. I just know that I have that habit of like looking at clothing labels and then like going into internet rabbit holes of like, you know, about everything that they do, and I guess like their conditions in terms of like, you know, labor conditions. And I've noticed that a lot of fashion brands aren't transparent with their policies. So I guess like one thing I hope in the future is that they are transparent, and you know, they're all right with being like held accountable, which I know they probably aren't, but like it's definitely good. Like the first step, I guess, for sustainable fashion is to be transparent with your policies. Because it definitely, I don't know, it helps a lot with becoming more aware of the brand. And I've just seen that with a lot of brands that they're not transparent. So I just hope that they are in the future. And hopefully they have beneficial policies.
Thank you guys. Oh,
Sorry. I would say like this idea has been mentioned before, but like realizing that change can happen, and how it does is through policies, like Madeline said. Like you can vote for people, you can look at the records of people in power right now and see how they vote, or like like how they vote for for certain policies, and you can research that information. And when you are able to vote, you can vote for people who will actually like implement policies that will allow for us um, to stop pollution, or not like limit the amount of pollution that happens. So I would say like I would hope people are more informed of who our representatives are and who's in like power, and making sure that they can vote for people that will create change.
Right, to go off of that, like at the end of the day, as important as accountability for your own actions is, as an individual, there's an extent to what you're able to do, and make like calling out companies that are greenwashing themselves, for example, or politicians who made certain promises in regards to environmental change and legislation and haven't followed through. Using the resources that are available to us, like our votes, or even just the internet. As we've been saying this entire panel, education is really the first step to sustainability and living a sustainable lifestyle. And at the end of the day, it's important to recognize what an individual is able to do and what you have available to you. And taking those paths, like again, educate yourself, or eating an extra vegetarian meal each week. Those little actions, those stepping stones to a life of sustainability do make enormous impacts. Like, for example, back like to this example of a diet, the most sustainable change that someone can make with their diet is actually cutting out red meat, and following that, cutting out chicken. Just one chicken fillet actually uses 6.5 bathtubs full of water to produce, which is insane. I love chicken, but since learning that fact, I've stopped my Buffalo Wild Wings nights. And it's important to recognize the things, like the actions that you're able to take at a personal level.
All of those points are so important. Thank you so much. We have another question from the chat, and they said that, I know that sustainable fashion is expensive. How do you plan on encouraging consumers to shop sustainably? Also, when do you expect sustainable fashion to become as prominent as fast fashion?
I'm just going to chime in because I kind of answered this earlier, but I think two things have to happen. One, in encouraging consumers to shop sustainably, remember there's a mature ecosystem. It is still maturing, but there's a mature ecosystem where people can buy at their allotted price point. The mental shift has to happen though. So instead of like going in the mall and buying a $20 shirt from Forever 21, which is the top one I hear from people, it might look like going to Poshmark and getting an upcycled shirt instead. So I think there's that. The other thing is, when will it become as prominent as fast fashion? Because right now, so much of sustainable fashion really is like this grassroots political movement, technically. I think when individual consumers start to look at themselves as activists, like, okay, my rights are at risk, and I need to advocate for, like everybody's been saying, better business practices so that, the city that I live in is not affected, the country I live in is not affected, the globe is not affected, then we're going to start to see more realistic changes. And when I say realistic, I mean like not greenwashing. We're going to start to see real sustainable fashion changes across the industry. And I just think I always draw parallels to the Black Lives Matter movement, because I think that is a really good example. And in my activism, I come from that school first. There are a lot of great examples of, I didn't know about police brutality and the extent in which it happens until the people who are political leaders, who were my age, I was a teenager, but they were my age, but they had a friend whose older brother was killed by the police, and they were already taking the steps, and then they had to educate me. And then once I got educated, then I was like, okay, this is really a problem. And then Mike Brown gets killed. And I'm like, okay, now I have context for like what needs to happen. And then as soon as we started, people started videotaping, I was like, okay, now we have a mechanism that actually works to continue the conversation and drive change. So I think each of the things that we've been talking about has to happen collectively so that the everyday consumer is empowered to put pressure on politicians.
I think also for fast fashion, for sustainable fashion to be as prominent as fast fashion, I think we have to shift our perception of what we expect a retailer to be. I personally don't envision sustainable fashion ever having the volume and homogenization that fast fashion has. And what I mean by that is I'm not sure there's a place for a 2-tier shop in every major city where you can buy the same exact shirt and it's there for 6 weeks and then it's no longer there and there's more shirts that are all brought in and everyone can buy the same top from that. I think what it's going to be, and I think in order for that prominence to happen, is for the mentality to be, oh, actually in our community we already have sustainable fashion happening here. We already have some little old lady down the road that's going to mend something for me. We already have that thrift store, that consignment store. We already have that woman or that man that's making amazing homemade garments out of their small business, their garage. Like that all already exists, I can guarantee you, in all of your local communities. I think it's just a matter of getting to a place where there's the ability to sort of empower those communities and have access to all of those things all at the same time. But I feel like the way we see the normal shopping experience, like that in it of itself, is not going to be how sustainable fashion ends up permeating all communities or becoming prominent.
If I can jump in, I would say there are 3 things that need to happen at the same time. I think that fashion is often seen by people who do not work inside of fashion as a bidimensional system. There are suppliers and there are consumers. The issue is that it's a regime complex, and I'm borrowing from my international relations background to just go and be like, okay, it's a regime complex. A regime complex is made out of very different realities, and we need them to shift at the same time. And that's why it's been so hard, because if it was just 2 actors, then it wouldn't be as difficult, in my opinion. So I think the main 3 things that need to happen so that basically make sustainable fashion more mainstream, as I said in the past, is education. As I already said it, we already covered it. I'm not going to go too much into detail about that. Then we need an increase in offering. As Madeline said, sustainable fashion could never be the volume or the multinational corporations that we have in fast fashion, and it shouldn't be. It should be buy less. It should be buy better. It shouldn't be buy the same exact thing that the person next to you has. It just shouldn't be. But the thing is that if we provide more access to it, then people, while they get educated, have an easier time making an impact through their education. And it's not only saying like, oh, it's like easier to find, but it's also more accessible in terms of like cost, in terms of like, cities tend to be segregated. I can find so many thrift shops like in the center of London. Don't know as much as I can find sustainable alternatives if I were to live outside. I don't know about that as well. And then a third thing that needs to happen is that, as you guys said, fast fashion retailers need to be held accountable and need to stop fucking selling things for 0.04 pounds. That's not possible. We all know what I'm talking about. I don't want to get into detail about that, but it's just, if we actually were to hold them accountable, fast fashion wouldn't exist in that way as much as we think about it now. And that would allow smaller businesses to have breathing space to grow and develop and reach kind of a old style local reality. I don't know if I made myself clear, but I feel like that's my point.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so they're all really amazing points. Just kind of looking at the time, since we are running a little bit past 6 at this point, we are going to cut off the conversation right here. But if you guys have more questions, just a couple last minute things before we all jump off. We are going to be sending out a brochure to all of you guys who attended, as well as a couple people that were kind of having technical issues and jumping on and off, with all the social media, the websites, etc., of how you can contact all of our incredible panelists. Huge thank you to all of our panelists. I know I learned a ton from all the information that you guys shared. I know I also have a couple questions and things I want to look into a little bit more after this. Just to quickly promote a couple of things around the Urban Garden Initiative that if you're still tuning on, that's good check out as well. Is we recently launched our chapter campaign and our ambassador program. So if you guys could check those out on the Urban Garden Initiative website, Instagram, that would be really awesome. If any of the panelists have any like last minute things they want to shout out as well for anyone still listening on, we're going to be recording this and sharing it as well. Feel free. And yeah, thank you guys all for attending. I'll stay on a couple extra minutes if you have any like last minute questions. But again, huge thank you to the whole range of incredible information you guys all shared.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to my fellow panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, okay, so Ron jumped.